Hey everyone, it's Jess Walker-Wyse, and I'm here with
Kevin Sliker.
And we are your local movement loan officers. And we're here today to talk about the VA home loan and our own personal experience with serving in the military. Veterans Day is just right around the corner, so we just think it's important for you to reach out to veterans in your community to hear their stories and also be inspired to share your own story of military service. So we're going to walk you through first some really important facts about the VA home loan, and then it'll just be kind of us chatting about our experience. Kevin and I both work for Movement Mortgage. We're located in Corvallis, Oregon, and we are licensed to lend across the West Coast and in Idaho. So we cover Washington, Oregon, California, and Idaho. Movement Mortgage is the number 8 VA lender in the nation. We're really proud of that. They also have partnered with the USO and the Warrior's Journey. So we really believe in helping our service members after their home loan closes. And Kevin and I are really passionate about doing that, both in our communities and just wherever our families live and purchase. Right now, Kevin's going to talk to you about eligibility requirements for the VA home loan.
Yes, so if you are curious, are you eligible, or maybe you know somebody who is, you would have to have served 90 consecutive days during wartime or 181 days during peacetime. If you were in the National Guard or the Reserves, you would have to serve a total of 6 years, barring any Title X activations. And if you are a surviving spouse of a service member who died in the line of duty or as a result of a service-related disability. Now we're going to hit you with some fast facts about the VA home loan.
All right, fact number 1, the VA home loan has been around since 1944. Established, tried, and true.
One of the big benefits to the VA home loan is that there's no down payment requirement and there's no mortgage insurance month to month.
Hey, you can also use your benefit again and again, and you can have 2 VA home loans at the same time.
Your benefit also never expires.
VA loans are available from your local lenders.
You can buy, you can refinance, and you can renovate a home with a VA home loan.
Now, it does have to be your primary home, so you have to occupy that property. It can be a single family, a multifamily, a condo, and there's even high balance loans available for higher purchase limits.
The VA has lenient guidelines for credit scores and debt to income ratios.
And last but not least, the funding fee can be waived for disabled veterans, which is a great benefit as well, making this a cost-effective loan option. All right, guys, we're going to get into it. Kevin and I are going to share a little bit about our military experience, and we would love to hear stories from you, so don't forget to like, comment, and share, or tag a friend. The first thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is what were some of the reasons that you decided to join the military? Well, first, what branch did you serve in? And then what were some of the reasons that you decided to join?
So I served in the Army, and how I fell on that branch was because I had a grandfather who served in the Navy, and I had a grandfather who served in the Marine Corps. And so I just kind of wanted to be different and wanted to join the Army. I knew at the time it had the most jobs available, probably didn't have the highest barrier to entry. And so that's why I chose the Army. And so what about you? How did you land on your branch of service?
Well, I grew up in kind of a small town. There wasn't a lot of opportunity there. I'm from Barstow, California, San Bernardino County, and I really didn't have that path to join the military, but I realized quickly as I was graduating there wasn't any opportunity for me. I didn't really have the money saved for college. I had a friend that was joining the Navy, and I thought, maybe that would be something interesting. So I just happened by the recruiter's office. I really wanted to join the Marines because I thought it was really cool and rugged, and I would be like such a badass. But the Marine recruiter wasn't there that day. Only the Navy recruiter was there. So I joined September 1st, and I left for boot camp on September 3rd. And that is my really moving story about why I joined the military.
It's a good point. I think a lot of times people always think that there's some big, huge motivation to join, and not everybody thinks it through. Not everybody puts that much weight into it. It kind of just happens for a lot of us, and I think that's true for most of my battle buddies.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit about what basic training was like for you.
So basic training for me, I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Okay.
So that was a place that I had never been to before. In the Army, that's the home of the field artillery, so there is a lot of like rounds going off in the distance, and it sounded intense. It felt intense. I remember the weather there was crazy, so it was like a new experience, new people, new place, and I took it seriously. All the training that we went through, I treated it with the respect that it deserved, and I went through, for anybody keeping tabs, I went through basic training in 2008. So it was not co-ed at that time. It was just males only.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was pretty intense. And I think it was a great experience. But yeah, it was tough, and I learned a lot. And yeah, I would do it again, I guess, if I could.
I think like to backtrack just a little bit. So you were in the Army. How many years did you serve?
Total 13, 14 years, all reserve time.
And what was your job? What did you do?
Oh, my first job was carpentry and masonry.
Okay.
So that is a 12 whiskey. And the second job I had was 12 Charlie, which is a bridge crew member. So my first job was construction and concrete. My second job was building bridges and and more on the rivers and waterways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I joined in 1999. It was co-ed. Mm-hmm. And boot camp was in Chicago, Illinois. I'm from the middle of the Mojave Desert. I'm from Southern California. It's dry and hot. I also had never been on an airplane until I went to boot camp. So it was quite an experience. I was a yeoman in the Navy, so it's pretty much a secretary. But, I was 17 years old, and on my first plane ride, arrive at boot camp, and my recruiter failed to tell me that they cut your hair. And so for me, the most traumatic part of boot camp was getting my hair chopped off. It was really devastating. I didn't expect that.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I love the boot camp experience. I've always been athletic, and I felt like I was worried about the physical component because that's what you hear most often about. But I loved that part. I mean, I loved PTing with my shipmates. I loved running. I loved all of the preparation and how they help you get in shape. Yeah. I think mentally it was a little bit bigger of a challenge than I imagined, just because you're away from friends and family. You're constantly being yelled at. You have no sleep. You are food deprived. I mean, that was part of my experience. Like, you're hungry, you're tired, and
there's no phones, no music.
Yeah,
it wasn't like you could put headphones in and just chill out. The people that you're surrounded with, some of them you liked, some of them you couldn't stand,
and you had to work with them every day. Yep.
Yeah, so that was a lot for me too. I think mentally, I just wanted to throw some people off a building, and other people I thought, man, we're just meshing so well. This is great. So yeah, it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. How about a funny moment from boot camp? Something come to mind?
Okay. Yeah. So one of the funniest times in basic training, and there was a lot, but this one in particular, we were on a nighttime ruck march. So we're in staggered column formation. So you have a bunch of people lined up on the left, a bunch of people lined up on the right, and we're just marching down this long road. And you're alone with your thoughts. It's quiet, so there's noise and light discipline. The only thing that we had were these little chem lights, little glow sticks. And I'll never forget, it was probably just me being tired and being delirious, which is what made it so funny. But one of our squad leaders had fallen back to go check on some soldiers. And then now he's running up the side of the column to get back into position. Mm-hmm. And when he went outside of the two columns, you're on rough terrain. And so I could hear him like his boots and his gear going chush, 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 chush as he starts getting closer. And I look back, and then all of a sudden his whole body and his chem light, the only thing I could see, the glow stick, it just disappears and absolutely vanishes. And then I just heard this like this. And what happened was, when he was running back to his position, he didn't see it coming, but he just fell into this huge ditch. And so a bunch of people had to fall out and go pick him up. Aww. But I'll just never forget looking back, what the hell's that noise? And then all of a sudden this glow stick just hopping along disappears. And then you hear this and this huge crash and thud. It was hilarious.
That's
of course,
awesome.
The drill sergeant's what the hell's going on back there?
Yep.
So yeah, it was hilarious. And that kept me alive and awake the rest of that ruck march.
Yes.
I was just sitting there giggling like a kid the rest of the time. Yeah.
Yep. My experience would be quite different from Kevin's. Just my pain points were, a little different. But I went to boot camp, so Chicago, Illinois. I was there October, November, and December, so in the middle of winter, and I'm from the desert. It was a lot. It was very cold. I was not prepared for that. But we were there during Halloween. And in boot camp, you're pretty deprived. Your nutrients only come from the galley. You can only eat certain things. And I remember I had watch, and we were standing by our RDC's office, and there were all these Snickers bars laid out. Okay, and I had already been in boot camp for 2 solid weeks, maybe 3. Right. And I was like, I would love a Snickers bar. I want a piece of chocolate so bad. You get this intense craving, right? So my friend Sarah and I were standing the watch. We're at balls to 8. And I'm like, listen, if we share it, no one's going to know. Mm-hmm. So we open the Snickers bar. We eat half. It's so good, you guys. I mean, if you haven't had chocolate for weeks and it was so good. And then we flush the wrapper through community evidence, right? So we go to bed. The next morning, the RDCs come in and they're screaming at us to get out of our racks. And immediately they're like, who ate the Snickers bars?
So
and Sarah and I are like, wait, bars?
So they
counted them. Duh.
Them, and it was a test?
It was, yes.
Oh
and we
God.
failed.
You guys are terrible.
Wait, listen. So then I'm like, okay, Sarah, just don't say anything. Like,
right.
They'll never know. Like, just, we have to be a team. We have to be united.
Right.
They're PTing us all day. They're
Snitches
making it
stitches.
rain.
Yeah,
So it's like sweat dripping off the
Right.
ceiling, right? And then they bring in the CO of the freaking base to interview us one-on-one. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, we're breaking down, right?
Oh my God.
So I tell Sarah, I'm like, just be strong. It's just a candy bar. We're not, because what will happen is you get set back a week in training. That's the fear, right? That you've broken this rule.
Yeah.
So we go in interview. Sarah comes out and she like gives me the nod. I'm like, okay, we're safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in and this is my answer. You know, the CO's like, did you eat the Snickers bar? And I was like, sir, I'm going to be totally honest with you. If it was a Three Musketeers bar, it definitely would have been me because I don't really like Snickers. So he didn't lie.
Right.
He just didn't tell the whole truth. So then this gal comes out. I don't want to use names that people might recognize, but she's sobbing and she admitted to eating both candy bars.
Wow.
So she took one just by herself and admitted
Okay.
to eating both of them. So we got off great. But
Nice.
I still to this day don't really like Snickers
That
bars.
was a sacrifice play on her part.
It was. She got set back a week in training. I mean, but she did also eat one.
I feel like you deserve.
Now
an
I
extra
feel
week.
bad.
Yeah, I feel bad for her. Yeah,
Well,
that's
I
terrible.
did when I got to A school. Actually, I had told that story, like you're in training and stuff, and the phone rings in the classroom, and they're like, "Oh, Seaman Walker? Oh yeah, she's here. Oh yeah, Division 463. Oh yeah." So he gets off the phone and he's like, "Hey, that was basic training called, and you got to go back. I had to divulge this lie, and you stole."
Oh,
from
really?
Yes.
Oh, so you did make it right.
No. I was like sweating. He played a trick on me. He was joking me, but I was like so stressed out. I was like, oh my God, they're going to pull me from A school back to,
Well,
okay.
karma's
Well,
gonna
now
come
you
back
guys
and
know
get you
my
for that one.
deep, darkest secret. Okay, where did you serve altogether when you were in?
A lot of stuff in the States. I did not go overseas. I didn't deploy. I wasn't in any major theater. I went to Belize for a mission down there where we were doing construction, building schools, like concrete pads for schools. I think it was for like Doctors Without Borders could come in. There was aid stations and things that were built. So it was me along with a bunch of other people building different things. My specific role and job was to build this school. So I was there with the little kids, and every morning we'd show up in our big army trucks and they'd come out and sing and pray for us. It was pretty cool. But yeah, around the United States, I went to Gulfport, Mississippi, which is actually a naval base. So your A school, that's what I called AIT. That's where I went. So that was confusing because I was just learning Army ranks and now I'm learning Navy ranks.
Yeah.
I'm saluting E4s, and because to me they look like colonels. And then Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, Fort Dix, New Jersey, JBLM, Fort Lewis.
Yep.
I mean, all over the United States, the Army has training camps and forts or bases all throughout, and so that's where I went. A lot of like random trainings out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I like you. I mean, I didn't go overseas, and I never served like during an active period of war. But I was stationed in Meridian, Mississippi, so right outside, and that's in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing to do there, so we didn't get into any trouble. And then Whidbey Island, Washington, was my first duty station. NAS Whidbey. We ended up being there 17 years because my husband was also active duty, and he did just over 20 years. But yeah, Whidbey was gorgeous, and again, I'd never been outside of California, so it was all pretty new experience for me. Now, we were kind of chatting and preparing for this interview, and Kevin had said that he had a friend that played pranks, or they played pranks on each other, and so I was like waiting for him to share this story with all of us.
Yes. So one thing that we used to do, I think now it kind of falls in line with like hazing. So it's probably not able to be done, which is sad. But we used to host caterpillar races in the barracks.
Okay.
So if you can imagine a military barracks, you have bunks on either side of this long like row house kind of style.
With
and
like vinyl floor.
Yeah, and in the middle of the room is just this wide open area. And so what we would do is we would take junior soldiers and we would zip them up in their sleeping bags, and we would lay them down on the floor in their sleeping bags. We'd put two next to each other, and then they would have to like, push their butts up in the air,
Scrunch,
and
like
then
an inchworm.
scrunch like a worm, And it would be like my guy versus your guy.
Okay, so you're
and,
like cheering him on.
We cheer him on, and they can't see anything because they're all
They're
just
totally
they're
zipped.
totally zipped up in their sleeping bags. And they would just scoot all the way down to the end of the barracks, and whoever got to the end won.
Okay.
But sometimes people would get off track. They would like kind of forget what
End
path
up
that
to
they're
a
on.
bunk
Yeah, and
or
then they
something,
just
yeah.
smack their head into a bunk. And so but I remember Caterpillar races being like one of the funniest things ever, and we would always kind of like force the new guys to do it, and you didn't have a choice. You had to get in the sleeping bag.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you ever see it in real life, I'm telling you, you will be in tears laughing. So.
I just think like those are some of the bright moments in sort of a difficult environment. It's like that camaraderie and that friendship and the laughter. And we didn't have, we didn't have devices. You don't have cell phones. You don't have iPads. You don't have any of those distractions. So you're building, you're working hard, and then during your downtime and recreation, you're reinforcing those friendships. I love those are some of my favorite memories.
And everybody
too.
goes through it. It's like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Everybody has something stupid that they had to do.
Yeah.
For me in the reserves, every summer we would have annual training. So it's like 2 weeks to 4 weeks of active duty time. And my birthday's in July, so every time I would go out into the service, it would be my birthday, and I kept it a secret for years. And one time it got out that it was my birthday, and so I remember a senior NCO made me get up on top of a truck in the middle of a motor pool, like 100-something soldiers, and he made me sing "I'm a Little Teapot." So it's like there's moments like that where at the time you're embarrassed and it sucks, but everybody has those ridiculous embarrassing moments.
Absolutely.
And so it's all fun and games at the end of the day.
I have one like that too. We in boot camp I got caught talking in the galley more than once. I was kind of chatty,
Shocker.
if you can imagine. And so my discipline was that when I got back to the barracks, I had to put my nose up against the barracks, and I just had to stand there and say, blah, 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 louder, blah, 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 louder, blah, blah, blah. And so you're like, my face is right up against the thing. And 2 days later, I got a demerit chit for talking in the galley. Again, it was really effective for me.
That's pretty funny.
Maybe I'm a rebel.
Good times.
What did you ever learn about a fellow service member that surprised you?
So one thing, I had a senior NCO who was he was a hard ass, and nobody really liked him. And he was always on everybody. You had to come correct when you were talking to him. And I just remember thinking like, God, this guy's such a prick. Like, I can't wait for him to get hit by a bus, And it's like, why be in the military if you're going to be an asshole the whole time? You know what I mean? It's like you're bringing down morale at this point. And I'll never forget one time we were in the retention office, which is like the recruiters once you're in service, and he was signing a new contract for like his third or fourth time. I think he was signing indefinitely. And he like mumbled to himself, like, now so-and-so can go to college. And that so-and-so was his son. And so I realized like he was doing all this for some greater good, and that greater good was being able to gift his GI Bill to his kid maybe. And it kind of made me think like, okay, this guy does have a heart. Like everybody, even the meanest, nastiest people can sometimes have a reason that's actually very like commendable. So that was something that I learned.
I like that. I'm kind of talking about leadership, and this isn't on our question, but I was just thinking this might be a good opportunity. If you had significant leaders who really impacted you and made a difference. I was just like trying to go through, my service time was so long ago, but there are definitely a few key people that I served with or that were in charge that were impactful. Do you have people that come to mind?
I definitely do. I think, for those of you who don't know, like being a reservist, you get talked down to all the time. You're less than like active duty totally weekend warrior. You're a weekend warrior. You don't have anything going for you. Like, you don't go to any school. So I wasn't airborne qualified. I didn't go to air assault school. They would call me slick sleeve, right? Because I never had a deployment patch. And I always took it in stride because I know what I am, right? But one of the things that always blew me away was if I ever was in a training environment or I was near an Army Ranger or a Green Beret, Special Forces guys, because there's always bases and places where you'll bump into these people. I was always blown away with how even just badass infantry dudes, like you didn't have to have a tab, like a Ranger tab. I was blown away with how humble they were in giving me their knowledge and giving me their takeaways and all the things that they learned. And it wasn't ever like, oh, I'm better than you. Yeah. They would tease me all day long at the table when we're eating chow. They would make fun of me for never be deployed. But when push came to shove and it got down to training, they were like, you need to do it this way because this will save your life. It was always just absolute humility of being like, this is what we did overseas. This is what we trained like. And I never once felt like the information was withheld. I didn't feel like any rangers didn't tell me what they did.
Right.
Because I was just like
Less
a reserve.
than,
Yeah, like it was. And so that's one of the things for me where I felt like, you know, it's kind of a spiritual organization. Like I have nothing but love for those guys. And I felt like, you know, I am not a hero, but like I have served with them.
Yeah.
And the fact that your heroes don't let you down, I think is something that you don't see very often. I think everybody has that pro athlete that, you know, has some issue personally, and then you feel
some
like,
colored
oh yeah,
event,
right.
Yeah.
And so these guys, like, sure, they had probably skeletons in their closet, but again, when it came down to it, they wanted to see me win. And they gave me all their tools and systems to do what I needed to do, and I was always just blown away with that.
Yeah.
Very,
it's
very
funny,
cool.
like as I'm thinking about the leadership I had in the military, you know, and being a young female in the military, I had a female commanding officer, a female CO, and it wasn't very common back then. And she was a hard ass, and she was just always after me, like, your skirt's out of regs, your hair is too long, don't chat with the officers when they come up to admin. Like, she was just so mean, and I was like, God, she's just awful, you know. And I had duty driver, and I had to pick her up from the airport one time. So imagine me, I'm like 18 years old, and I'm picking up my frickin' CO.
Right.
First of all, I can't even drive that good. Yeah. Second of all, I'm really bad with directions. It was just like a whole scene, right? So anyway, Commander Wilder comes off the plane, and I'm like, hi ma'am, you know, here to drive you. And she's like, I'll drive. So she ended up driving us, and then we like bonded, and we had this moment. And you know what she told me? She's like, I see greatness in you. And it was like transformed my whole life. It was like the reason she was so hard on me and the reason she was pushing me so hard is because she wanted me to be better. So
she saw the potential.
Commander Wilder, if you're out there, thank you for that. I didn't like it at the time, but it was good. When did you leave the military, and what was the process like?
So I left, February of 2021? So we were coming out of COVID. A lot of, in the reserves, you show up one weekend a month, every month. And a lot of the drill weekends at that time were honestly Zoom calls and like online trainings. So I would say I left the military like in Guardians of the Galaxy, where people just turned to dust and like faded away. There was no parade, there was no ceremony, there was nothing. I literally like dumped my stuff at the building, and it was like a delivery. Like, here's
your Amazon
here's
Prime
Sergeant
package.
Sliker's crap. And then like the supply sergeant took in all my stuff, and then I left. And then it was when I hit February, that was my ETS date, and that was it. Nobody called me, nobody said thank you, nobody.
You just like went home and ate ramen, and you were like, I'm done.
That was it. I was done. I was out.
Pretty lackluster departure.
Yeah, for sure. But you know, I don't know, I think I felt relief, you know, leaving and not
knowing that commitment was finished.
Yeah, like being in the reserves is weird, and depending on what job you have in the reserves, there's a high likelihood that you could be deployed if need be. So as a bridger, we're pretty rare. There's only a handful of units in the United States that can build a bridge, and so at the time of me serving, there was whispers of Iraq.
Yeah, high likelihood.
My unit went to Iraq, but I got to the unit once they came back from that rotation, and then when Kim Jong-un was like shooting rockets over Japan at the time, they thought maybe we'll go to North Korea because there's a lot of rivers there, and so we got spun up for that. And I just always felt like it could happen, you know. Yeah. And when the shoe drops, you got to go. And so I felt relief in that aspect of just not having to think about it. Grow the beard out, grow my hair out. Which he did, by the way. And then collectively as an office, we were like, Kev, you got to button it up.
Be more professional. That's funny because when my husband retired too, it was like he had to go through the whole transition of like what beard style he was going to adopt, because you don't have that opportunity. When I got out, actually, it's kind of something I wouldn't say like I regret, but definitely something that weighs on me. So I got out in November of 2001. So if you remember, September 2001 was the incident at the Twin Towers, and so I was serving active duty at that time. You know, I was with my shipmates when we watched the plane hit the tower, and I had already had my end of service date selected. So I was already transitioning out. I was on like my temporary duty phasing out, right? But that moment happened, and a lot of fear. I mean, to be honest, I was a young person, and I was just really frightened for what the future would be, what that impact would be for military service. I also was with my husband at that time, and the reason that I got out was because I knew we were going to have babies, and I didn't want us to be dual military and both deploying. So like I had already made that decision and was pretty convicted in it, but I had, I had some sadness and kind of confusion about letting my shipmates down or not being there or taking the easy way out because my service date had come
Kinda
to an
like
end.
FOMO.
Yeah. And you saw other people joining. Like at that time, people started coming in waves, and here I was on my way out. So it was a hard time, but in the end, really happy for that decision. I have a beautiful family, and I got to be home with them. But yeah, I think that decision is always a little bit difficult for everyone. When it's time to go, when you're going to get out.
That's true.
What are some things that you learned about yourself?
I think the biggest thing I learned about myself in all the training and all the stuff that we went through and interactions with people, I truly believe that I am my own worst enemy. Like, no matter what situation I was in, I was the one that was more in my way than whatever that obstacle was. I'm in my head a lot. I think too much. I overanalyze. I think that's what I learned, was that if I don't get to where I want to be, it's 1,000% my fault.
Because you have all the support, all the training, all the resources,
no one
all the
else's.
people.
Even if I didn't have those things, it would still be like me some way, like messing it up. And I think that's true for a lot of people, but I think if I didn't have the military, I wouldn't have been able to call it out like that and know that that's an issue
and
then
identify it.
Work towards it. Yeah. So I think I am my biggest problem.
Yeah.
I'm my biggest setback.
I think there's a lot of self-development that happens through military service. My experience was really positive, and I think the thing that I took away from it was that I was very capable. When I was a 17-year-old kid, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and being able to have that experience and to know that I can mentally and physically get through some of those challenges, I never would have guessed that about myself. And even now when I share with people that I was in the military, doesn't add up.
Right, yeah. Okay, so another question. This is a really good one. I like this one. It's probably my favorite on the whole list. Is there anything you wish civilians understood about military service?
I mean, immediately what comes to mind is like there is a camaraderie and a bond like no other. Like immediately, like Kevin and I have been working together for almost 5 years, but immediately when we met, it was like we knew that we both served. We immediately had that camaraderie and that rapport with one another. Anytime to this day, like I see someone with a hat on that they served, or a military backpack, there's just like this instant trust and safety, and it's like nothing I've ever experienced in my life. And you have to think I've been out 22 years. It's a long time. I've been out for 22 years. I still am friends with people that I met in boot camp. So those relationships are so deep and special. And I think in the civilian world, yes, you have camaraderie with your employees, but it's very different.
I think you're right too. When you mention deep, that's so true. It's like, because you're going very deep on these relationships, but very short durations.
Yeah.
It's like I have buddies that I still talk to this day that I would be able to like hit it off with them instantly, like we're brothers, but we only spent 3 weeks together.
I know, it's wild.
Like 3 weeks out of my entire life, but we spent every waking moment together.
Yes.
We ate together, we took shits together, we ate, like, we did it, slept together, we did everything together. And so it's like when you spend that much time with somebody, you get to know them really fast.
You get to know them really well. And you're so vulnerable because it's like everybody's there from a different place. Everyone has a different reason for serving. But that is something else too, I think, that I really loved about the military is the diversity. And like I think the best way to describe this is, we'd go to potlucks for the chief's mess or whatever, right, and go to someone's house, and you're there, and there's like lumpia, and there's gator, and there's barbecue, and there's fried rice, and like it's so diverse, and it doesn't matter where you came from or what you look like or what your family status was. Like, you are all service members together. You're all shipmates. You're all battle buddies. It's like it doesn't matter. And I miss that sometimes in the civilian world. It's not intentional, but it's just not the same way of coming together and sharing, sharing.
I think that's a good point, the diversity. One of the things that I wish people understood about military service is it's not a bunch of, white guys waving American flags and like
ready to shoot it up.
You're not like robots who just follow orders. Like, yes, there's discipline, yes, there's pride, but those come from like the history and the tradition. It doesn't come out of like beating your chest kind of pride. And I think when I look back at just even like the soldiers that were assigned to me, I mean, there was probably 6 different races and ethnicities all in one little bunch.
Financial backgrounds.
Yes, and it's so cool. I mean, specifically for the Army, they recruit from all over the United States. They recruit from all over the world.
Yeah. Yep.
So we had Pacific Islanders, we had, guys from the Northeast, who sound like New Yorkers, right? And then you got guys from the South that are like, blah, 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 blah. And it's weird because it's almost like a different dialect, but you all get together and it's kind of like a meritocracy.
Yes.
The best idea wins out.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people probably don't understand. We're not a bunch of robots just following orders mindlessly. We're not droids. It's like we are... individuals who think for ourselves, and specifically in the Army, I think too, it's like the biggest, I think, education piece is the leadership. Like you're always training for the next rank or the next position. Like we had a saying, you're only one bullet away from a promotion, right? So you always had to be privy of what's going on. Like what are my lower subordinate people need to be doing right now? What are my seniors doing right now? And like, how do I fit into the chain, and where do I need to be? And you play your position. And I think that's something that the civilians kind of don't understand.
I mean, I think I found too in the military, like my experience, as a woman, is that I found that people can have a lot of success no matter what you are, where you're from, what your background is. And some of the people, like, some people might come from affluent families and they just have this need to serve to fulfill that for their family. But other people come from, they had jail or the military as an option, right? And those people are working side by side and learning from each other. I think it helped me to become very tolerant, accepting, loving, and to value other people's opinions. And I think that healthy level of disagreement in the military too, because the foundation is that we respect one another. So you can have some of those tough conversations. I mean, thinking back to 9/11 and when that happened, it was so significant, and immediately the country is divided. But as a squadron, we were all one family, grieving that, feeling that for the country. So
let's talk about kind of your experience in the military, which I think is unique because you have a partner who was active duty. So we're going to kind of break into the marriage, the partnerships, and the family life. How did you meet your husband?
Oh my gosh, it's so wild. So first of all, without the military, John and I never would have met. So I'm really grateful that experience brought us together. John's from Corvallis, so he was raised here. He joined the Navy when he was 19. He always knew he wanted to do that. That was like his dream and his path. I randomly joined on a Saturday because there wasn't anything better to do. So we both end up at Whidbey Island, and I'm the duty driver for my command. And this was not when I was picking up Commander Wilder. This was a different time. So I go down to SeaTac to pick up my shipmates, and this is when you could go and wait in the waiting area. So you didn't have to go through security. You just wait, and people come off the plane and you get them.
You're dating yourself now.
I know.
Yes.
But I mean, I just had 22 years since I've been out. I mean, I want to cry on the
back when you could smoke in the grocery
But I don't
stores.
look it, right? Okay, so I'm sitting there waiting for my shipmates, and John is there, and I'm like, hey, I know you. And he says, like, I was bothering him. I was not bothering him. I was really cute and I was really friendly. So anyway, that's how we met. We met at SeaTac. I recognized him just from like the town, and he was on a bowling league and stuff, but we never like worked together or served together. But we met at the airport and we exchanged information. He was actually deploying to Germany. So he was like, hey, when I get back, I'll call you. I'm like, okay, I'll wait. I'll be waiting right here. And he never called. So then this is kind of funny. So like 8 months later, there was a chief retiring, and so we were all going up to the Chiefs Club to go to this retirement party, and I was the designated driver because I wasn't old enough to be drinking. And I walk in and there he is. Totally random. I'm like, hey, you never called me, and here we are 23 years later with 3 kids.
That rolls into the next one. What was your first impression of him?
Okay, I would be honest. He was kind of a nerd. He was like reading some kind of Star Wars book and had on some kind of like old Navy graphic tee. I don't know. He was just kind of a nerd, but he looked nice. And John was an AT in the Navy. He was a pretty big, beefy guy back then working on the aircraft. And he's just really kind and respectful and kind of nerdy.
So he's brains and brawn.
He is.
Okay. All right. All right. How did you know that he was right for you? Was it the Star Wars book?
It was kind of like I couldn't get rid of him, but in a good way. Like, we meet at SeaTac. I mean, how random is that? And we had an instant moment of connection. And then to reconnect at the Chiefs Club 8 months later, it was like, okay, something's telling
Something's
me
going on
something
here.
here. And I remember
Yeah.
like when we went home, his extended family, they're from Ohio, and we went home and we're telling them our story, and they're like, you just met a stranger in the airport. I mean, to think of it's so wild.
It
Most
is.
people marry people they went to school with or know, or you meet somebody on, eHarmony or something like that. It was just a
Right.
random happening, and he ended up being a good catch.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll talk just a little bit too
Yeah.
about his career, and you'll probably get into that too. But John served just over 20 years in the Navy. He retired as a chief. He retired, I think it's been almost 6 years now. So we were together his whole career. Did several deployments, lots of workups, lots of detachments, lots of time apart. He lived down on the ship in Bremerton for a while, and he would just come home and bring his laundry. So it was like all we would do all weekend was like visit and do laundry. But military was really great for us and our family and gave us a lot of opportunities, and I'm so grateful for it and for his service and his commitment.
Yeah, and it's really nice too because he's still, a relatively young guy, so he's
Yeah,
starting this
he has a second career
phase in his life now, and I think that's something people don't understand. It's like you could spend a lifetime in the military, or you could just do your 20, get out,
Yeah.
and you're not like old and busted at
Yeah.
that point. I mean, depends on what your job is, I guess, but yeah, you could start a whole nother sort of avenue in life, which is really cool.
Yep.
So that's good for him. What were some of your best times in your relationship? I guess in the military.
Yeah. It's like homecoming is obviously so exciting, and that's kind of one highlight that comes like when they're coming home. But there's also a lot of stress associated with that. I think my favorite times are like the Chiefs ball or the Navy ball or the like we had what do you want to call it? Like squadron games where we go like paintballing, or we would do like track and field events and stuff. So that togetherness with the other spouses and with the kids and the family, it's like an extension of your whole unit. And so when the guys are deployed, that helps us who are at home to build those relationships and trust each other. That was really some of my favorite times.
Makes sense. So you mentioned homecoming is people would think that that's a great moment, like welcome home, but like you said, it's stressful. And I'm sure there's times where people would assume when he's leaving, you're thinking like, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
But there are probably moments where you're like, good riddance.
Sometimes,
So,
like for the really short detachments, like he's been on a couple weeks. I'm like, I got this. This is fine.
What were some of the difficult times, and how did you deal with them?
I think we were super fortunate that I had served. So before we, made this commitment to each other and got married, I knew like what my role was going to be in supporting him. And I was really proud to be a military spouse. I knew my job was to hold down the fort, keep the family moving, and to not tax or stress him while he was out on the mission. That doesn't mean I always did that, but I did try, my best. And so the challenging times, definitely being apart, like you have to have good communication. And back then it was writing letters. Like he would deploy and we'd have to write letters, and you'd have to number them because they come out of order and out of sequence. And so we did a lot of letter writing. I know I'm dating myself again, but
well, not even the letters, but the number thing. That's interesting. I never thought of that.
And care packages. But the homecoming, it is such a great, exciting moment. Like you're welcoming them back, but then the roles change a little bit because now I'm not independent. I have someone else to think about, and how much responsibility does he want to take on when he comes back, and keeping the kids really connected too. It's just a lot of work and commitment, and both of you have to be willing to do that.
Okay. So that's a good segue too to this question now. We're on a good roll. What advice do you have for other military couples?
I think the most important thing would be don't live on base. Buy a house out in town.
You mentioned communication.
I'm not knocking anyone who lives on base, but I will, there's some drama, there's some, we always lived off base. And again, Kevin and I here, we're slinging mortgages. So if you don't want to live on base and you want to be a part of the drama, call us. No, but communication is definitely key. Communication, patience, understanding, all of those things are super important. And having the goal in mind. I think the other thing for John and I that, has helped us be successful, we always knew he was going to retire. So we always knew we were going to hit that 20-year mark, and we always had a plan for after. That is super important. So before he got out, he knew like, hey, I'm going to go be an electrician. I'm going to go pursue this. And then we had the opportunity to move home to Corvallis to be with family. Right. So all of those positive things that happen after service have helped to, strengthen us beyond that.
That's good. I think too with, any couple, not even just military ones, but like expectation management.
Ooh, yeah, that's
is
good.
really, really key. I met my wife at the time we were just dating, but I was already in service, so I was already in like this groove of knowing what my time in the military looked like and how often I'd be away from home and all those kinds of things. And it was just expectation management, like how involved do you want to be or not want to be.
Yeah.
And we set those parameters and then we just stuck to it, and it was no drama.
Yeah.
So
that is, I mean, thinking back to deployment too, it's like I knew I wouldn't get a phone call for 3 or 4 days, right? I couldn't be mad about that. Now there were a couple times when he was on, we call it the Stinkin' Lincoln, the USS Abraham Lincoln.
Okay,
It's like
yeah.
an old archaic ship, and the
Made
comms
of
were horrible. So like I would be like, hey, I have this in an emergency and I need your opinion on something, and it'd be like 4 or 5 days of nothing. But I would still be emailing, and I'm like, why haven't I heard from you? What are you doing? Da, 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 da. You know, and he's like waiting for the dial up on the ship, and then he
Right.
gets peppered with all these messages,
Right.
and he's like, comms was shut down. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that the military does that
Yep.
sometimes when
Yep.
things are heating up. So expectation management.
And then you mentioned kids.
Yeah.
This is probably a big one, I think, for a lot of service members. And depending on what your time in the military looked like for you, I mean, barring like Vietnam and being drafted, we all chose to go. We all did it for ourselves. But I think sometimes kids can look up to you as a parent as like an idol, as like a hero, and then maybe they'd want to go do something like you did, and maybe your experience doesn't outweigh your responsibility as a parent, right? So like, what advice do you have for like kids who want to join the military and want to be like mom and dad, who maybe those parents don't want them to? Or
I mean, I'm really in favor of military service, and we're raising 3 boys, and our oldest has made it pretty clear he doesn't want to do that, and I'm okay with that too. But there's so much value that comes from the military. Is it risky? Yes. Can we control what's happening in the world? No. But the service above self that you learn, the sacrifice, the commitment, the camaraderie, and the exposure to the bigger, greater world. Like, even if you don't travel, I mean, all those opportunities happen in the military. I don't know anything else in the world that duplicates that. And so for my kids, like, I just think that is such a good opportunity, in addition to the educational benefits, the VA home loan, your medical benefits. Like, John's retired, he has disability, we have a pension. So there's so many positive things about it. I would love if one of my kids were to say, yeah, I want to join the military and I want to serve. And I hope that John and I've created like a positive conversation about that. If you come to our house, he's got like all the little pictures up, and it's like, this was our time in service, and it was a really good thing for us.
Yeah, I think too, like you said, the military is really a global organization. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it's like no Fortune 500 company is going to pull you into port in Hong Kong and then take you over to Africa and drive up to Europe. The Navy travels a lot more than a lot of other branches, but it's true. It's like the camaraderie and some other intangibles you probably wouldn't get at any other organization. So something to think about. Okay, well, that's it.
That's all we've got. We would love to hear from you. We would love for you to share your story, or sit down with a veteran in your community or someone in an organization that you're with and just ask them about their time in the service. I think it's really happy to have shared some things that I haven't thought about in a long time. So this is, it's fun to relive some of those memories and just remember, like what a great opportunity it is, and how it makes us who we are today. I mean, I would not be who I am now without the military.
Yeah. And for any of you who are veterans, don't forget to check in on your old pals. Make sure they're doing okay. Life changes when you get out of the service. Some things can kind of come back to haunt you. Not everybody's experience was the same. And so just because you're not in uniform anymore doesn't mean you can't look out for each other.
Yeah,
so,
stay connected.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks
guys.
guys.